I'm Mel here, and here's a little update since I last uploaded video about my campervan journeys. I'm going to share with you where I went, where I took the campervan to, some of the people I met, and also what happened when I got to the final destination, which was the key aspect of the whole trip, really, and what has happened since. So I'm going to start with what happened since. I've had the campervan for a couple of years now, and I got to visit so many wonderful places in it. And this trip to Scotland was really meaningful for me because, as I said on other videos, my mum is Scottish. She was born on the Isle of Bute in Rossi and grew up there. So I wanted to revisit after. Hadn't been to Scotland since I was about 15 when I went up with my mum and her partner at the time. And I hadn't been onto the island since I think I was about 11. So I'm going to share more about that and how this trip was very different. The other aspect of this, I will be doing a video on some of the maybe 12 things that I learned about campervan life. And at this stage, after having a van for a couple of years and going around most of the UK, my goal was to visit as much of the UK as I could because the UK is beautiful. We've got so many wonderful places, whether you're into visiting all the waterfalls, the castles, the history, the historic towns like London, Bath, York, Edinburgh, all of those different places that lots of tourists like going to, but also all the nooks and crannies of the places that people don't always know about. And that's the thing in van life is people do share these hidden locations that they've discovered because they spend a lot more time on the road, and so often we want to see as much of the inland and the coastline as possible. So I've been home a few weeks, but I was really exhausted when I got back. I'd been traveling for over 3.5 weeks and putting a lot of miles. And I've found driving on and off tiring anyway. And I was making sure that I was stopping off in each place for at least 2 nights. But I did visit a lot of places. I also had to change the locations or go to different places that I hadn't planned, stopped off in other places that I hadn't thought about staying. And when I came back, I was really tired, exhausted. I was full of coal and just thought, I need to land in one spot and get grounded again. And of course, I'm into yoga, meditation, and well-being, and it's also about being able to read into your body and pace what's going on for you. And I knew that I'd have some downtime when I got back from this trip. So also, the journey of the van. The van is currently with the mechanic, and I was sad. I had to leave it in Scotland. I finally broke down. I probably could have got it started again, possibly made my way back in it, but it was raining so hard. The weather changed really when we got to Norfolk, and it was intermittent days of pouring down and then beautiful sunshine, pouring down beautiful sunshine. So I'll describe a bit about the trip and how it started in a moment. But so I'd got to the final destination, which was Butte, and then I was making my way back. I was feeling that something wasn't quite right. I was jump starting it quite a few times in the morning, and I didn't feel safe now driving to Glasgow and Edinburgh, which were going to be the locations. And also, this was around the time when the storm was due to come in that I'd heard about, and the van just seemed to be struggling in the wetter weather, and I couldn't work out what was wrong with it. So I made my way instead down the west coast. I was going to go right around the west coast, but I met someone on the ferry that was telling me about the landscape and maybe not to attempt to do the whole of the west coast, especially in that weather, because the wind was starting to come up. I think we were already at about 60 or 70 miles an hour by the time I was at that point. And so I made my way towards Dumfries. They had a castle there. It was a little market town. I thought I'd spend some time there. Anyway, just as I was heading into Dumfries, the van just lost power and I pulled over to the side of the road. Luckily, I decided to use the B road instead of the motorway because it was thrashing down so hard. the hills were monumental, and I just knew that it would struggle trying to do that. So I went on the B roads that if I broke down on the country lane, it was safer and it'd be easier for the breakdown recovery service to come out. So I broke down and I thought, right, I need to call them. I need to get this sorted now. And they were great because strangely, the breakdown recovery people were about 10 minutes away. They actually had a main yard there, and call that synchronicity, possibly why I had a compulsion to go to Dumfries and go to that part of the coast, because actually originally on the way up I was going to be exploring the west coast first and coming back round to the east coast. So like I said, I'd made quite a lot. I had a broad idea, an outline of where we were going to visit, but that changed every day, literally. Very different to my Welsh trip. And I wanted to also explore the history and visit the castles and talk to people and eat some of the food I hadn't had since I was a kid. So the van broke down in Dumfries and the guy came out and they were brilliant, really good service, and checked over, and I told him what had been happening. And he was of the same mind as me that he probably wasn't going, with the storm coming in and the rain being so hard and the winds, it wasn't safe enough really to carry on driving because we didn't really know why it was cutting out. Because once I got it started, the engine sounded fine. So they were going to take the van, and there was three options. And luckily, I had good breakdown cover designed specifically for caravans and campervans, because the idea is that most people have got a campervan or a caravan are actually going to a campsite or a location or a festival, and you don't want to ruin your holiday, so often they'll take you there and then take you to the garage or drop you off back at home, depending on what it is you want. So I'd already been on the road like nearly 3.5 weeks, and I was going to extend the trip, but with the weather shifting, there wasn't really anywhere in the UK, unless I probably drove back down to Bournemouth, that was safe from the storm and the thrashing of the waves and the wind. And I certainly felt that when I was driving down to Dumfries, because I was right on the coast. You're on the side of Ireland and the Atlantic. So I could really feel that weather starting to come through. So the option was that they take you and the van in their transporter, and they're only allowed to drive for about 4 hours. So they drop you off at some service station somewhere, and you wait for the next driver to come along and then take you another 4 hours. And I think it would have taken probably about 3 days to do it that way. Or the company will pay for you to get on the train and get back home. But I had so much stuff with me, because in the van I've got stuff for winter. I had 10 boots, food, everything. Or the other option is you get a hire car. So I decided to book a hotel in Dumfries, spend some time there, get a hire car, and empty as much out the van that I could, because I wasn't sure when I was going to see it again. And they take the van away, so I was a bit sad, because you build up a relationship with your camper van. It's great. It's part of your home. It's my studio. It's my sanctuary. It's where I meet people, and it's where I spend time out in nature, just enjoying the environment. So they took the van and dropped me off at the hotel, and then the next day I went and picked up a hire car just as the storms were really starting to take hold. And I was now in I think it was a brand new car, maybe 6 months old, with lots of buttons, and was doing strange things while I was driving it, and started to make my way back down from Scotland. But I stopped off a few places because I had the car for 3 days, and I went to Leeds, and then I went to Manchester, and I went to the grave side of my uncle and my mum, because the whole idea was to get to Butte on the 29th of September, because that was the anniversary of when my mum passed, and that was the goal. So then I went back down to Manchester, to the graveside, left some flowers, going across country from Leeds to Manchester in a storm, which was really starting to take shape. When I got to Manchester, actually, the sun was coming out and it wasn't raining as bad, but between Leeds and Manchester, it was horrendous. But I was in a car and I felt safer this time, even though I didn't put self drive on. the steering wheel was taken over, and I kept on getting these flashing lights saying control the car, even though the car was being battered by winds at 80 miles an hour. I literally had to drive 30 or 40 miles an hour on the motorway because of the vans going past. And you had no visibility for about 2 seconds, which is really quite stressful. So I was, with that stress of the van breaking down and not knowing what was happening, then having to empty it and it raining all the time, and then stopping off uh, over the 3 days on the way back to come back home. If you know anything about mind-body connection and physiology, is sometimes then what happens is you do need to literally land. It's a term that we use in yoga. You need to land and just lay down and reflect on everything that's happened, because I didn't want to lose the memories and momentum that I'd built with all the amazing stuff that had happened on that trip, and just how many things unfolded. But I really needed to settle and just have some quietness and not be in a constant state of motion. I don't know how lorry drivers do it and people who work on oil rigs, this constant state of your body being moved around all the time. And especially when you're dealing with really hilly areas, because you're, depending on how powerful your engine is, but you're always going to lag behind in comparison to a car. So your body's carrying that state of stress. So there's a weird combination of feeling really good about what you're seeing and stopping off and having some really lovely moments, those aha moments when you drive round a corner and you say, oh, wow, it's beautiful. Those beautiful moments. At the same time, the anxiety of keep going to a new place. Where do I park? How long can I leave the van? Is it safe here? What's the weather like? If you park too close and stay too close on some of the beaches, the tide can come in really strong. And we've seen some pictures of vans being too close and or being on the beach and being sucked back into the sea. So that was getting home, landing, spending some time here, and I just didn't have the mental, emotional capacity really to do any videos. I've just got back into writing and recording some things and some of the other projects I've been working on at the same time. And because things kept on happening, my plan of writing more and recording more videos and spending more time doing deep dives actually got disrupted consistently. In comparison to Wales, that was sunny, warm, fluid, it flowed, it just unfolded. Most of it was good. In comparison to that, going up to Scotland was resilience building, challenging, thrashing by the weather, uh, imbued with poignant, deep, meaningful conversations. So I'm going to share with you now the trip I took, because sometimes it helps me just to articulate what I decided to do, really. And like I said, I've done this in the past when I had dreams of going to Italy for years, and it was a dream. It was I'm going to go to Italy, I'm going to go to Italy. And then one time I was talking to my son, and I had these two options. I was in between jobs. He said, Mum, go. He's been great because he'll just say, Mum, just go. You don't know whether you'll be able to do it next time or in a few years' time. And at that time, that was 2018, and I'd been in really, my last year at my previous job was really stressful. And now I was working for the NHS in a much bigger program, and that was really stressful. So I decided to take 2 months off, and I went to Italy for a month. But I didn't have a van and wasn't driving. I've never drove in Europe. But the idea of being constantly on the move and having these moments of fatigue, real fatigue, of wonder, of meaningful conversations, and it's nice to reflect on that and not just you come back off a holiday and get back into work within a day. You've lost that amazing feeling of sunshine and freedom, and eat when you want and drink when you want and drink on a Tuesday if you want. You can throw the rules out the window of what your normal life looks like. And being in the camper van is a bit like that because it's not a holiday. But they're like mini holidays, but because if you're constantly traveling around, there's a lot of time spent planning. There's a lot of time spent thinking about where's safe to go, Can your van manage certain places? What if you get off there? Are the people around, not around? What about the parking? I got into Wales. I didn't realise most city centres were 30 miles an hour, which is really difficult to drive. Fair enough if you're driving near schools and through small villages. But so there are all these things that your brain has to compute. Um, so you're in a state of awareness, of readiness, of focused attention, being mindful that you have to stop off and make sure if there's fatigue and your eyes start to go really heavy, you have to make sure that you stop, as well as the wonder. And the adrenaline can kick in and you can have this feeling of just wanting to go, 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 stay at it, stay at it. So on a physiological mental health level, it's both. So you've got to honour when you've done enough and you're tired and you want some rest and stay somewhere for a few days. And then you've got to honour when the energy comes up and you want to go out and explore. Because when I landed in York just near York on the first day, I'd had a couple of days of where I'd got the van broke down and I was on a campsite in the middle of nowhere. And at that time, I didn't even know if I was going to get to Scotland. So there was this constant feeling of not knowing if it's going to unfold. So I was in a total space of uncertainty and trust and faith, and saying, okay, will it work out? Will I be able to move forward in that direction? So I'm going to share with you the beginning of the trip, what I saw, and then towards the end, and I'll put the time points on it, about going up to Scotland. And if the video runs out, I'll do a second one called part 2, because my phone does what it wants when it wants. It's 10:10 on the clock. It's in numerology, that's a great sign. We're at new beginnings. We've just had the new moon, full moon in Taurus, which is my sign. And this is about being grounded, focused, organized, stable, security, So I'm in the right place, at home, landed, and spending some time doing the things that I enjoy. And one of those is sharing my knowledge, awareness, and experiences through these different projects that I've got. The Changing Spaces is that deeper dive into history and politics and my experience of the different locations that I go to. And the campervan journeys are clearly, the campervan trips. But I also do videos where I take pictures of the scenery only and I don't talk on it. And I went to the van the other day because it's still at mechanics. He's just up to his eyes, as a lot of mechanics are in cars at the moment, that all need something doing on them. And I've just brought back my camera because I was taking pictures on the road as well. So hopefully it's stored on my memory card, because I'm dealing with electronics, Wi-Fi that keeps cutting out, vans that keep cutting out, weather I can't control. And that's the nature of life. And we're moving into that sort of time zone in a way of what is in our control and what isn't. And how do we stay in a state of knowingness in the uncertainty, the sort of paradox of life in a way. So the trip, it's 18 minutes in. So the idea was to have a trip to Scotland. It'd been on my mind for a while, as I said, and September or March or April seems like the only realistic times that I was going to be able to go for all sorts of reasons. And it depends on what part of Scotland you go to as well and what it is that you want to do. But I hadn't been for a long time. As I said earlier, I hadn't been since I was about 14, I think. And I'd been up to Edinburgh and lots of places on the way we'd stopped off. And Carlisle was like the entry point. And psychologically, I had that in my mind. I had a picture of me as a young girl swinging on the sign, and my mum took a picture of, and that was like the start of the trip. Maybe Hadrian's Wall is more accurate of how it distinguishes England and Scotland. And diving into that history was fascinating. So a friend came over from America and she was going to spend some time with me. And we decided, first of all, I was going to show her around Windsor. I live near Windsor, to show the castle and talk about some of the history and spend some day around the shops there, which we did. And then she stayed at my place. And then the next day we had a place booked in London, near the Tower. And we were going to spend 3 days at least over in London. So we got the train there, and I struggle more with trains. I love trains, but I can't carry all the stuff that I've got on a van on a train. It's just too much lugging stuff about. So we took some stuff and got to the hotel and started touring. And I acted like a tourist. I thought we'll go on the hop on, hop off bus, and there's 3 routes in London. I think it's red, green, and blue. And we chose one of the routes, and that took about 2 hours. And that trip epitomised, in a way, what the weather was going to be like the rest of the journey. Because we were on the top of the bus, it was baking, it was t-shirt weather, had my camera, I was taking lots of pictures. So I put some videos up of those on my page as well. Had a tour around there, and then my friend wanted to go to the Tower of London, and I'd not been in there, so we went there, and that was brilliant because of all the history. And I started to make all these connections between what I was learning about history, politics, the rich, the poor, the working class, the fight for equality and rights, and all of that kind of stuff that's been going on in the industrial age when I was spending time in Bristol and then into Wales. And then I was at the Tower of London, and the incredible history that it's got there. So we spent a bit of time looking around there. But while I was on the hop on, hop off bus, 1 minute it was really sunny, it was baking, the next minute it poured down. So I think 3 times we went back up on the deck after the rain had literally, the heavens opened and thrashed the whole bus. We were due to go to Portobello. I wanted to go around there. I love Portobello Market. It's great on a Saturday. It's every week. And they've got such a mixture of antiques, retro clothes, new clothes, boutique shops, cafes, bars, and a whole section for street food. It's brilliant. It's a whole day at least out. You can do a week, do a week. I think it is open on Sunday, but I tend to go Saturday. I think that's when it's most. They have more stalls because the whole street as well as market through Portobello is just really active. You want to get there early if you do want to buy stuff though. Then there was a march that weekend. I think there were 3 marches near Whitehall, I think it is, and Trafalgar Square in London, about all sorts of things. And we knew that the trains were going to be really busy, or the tubes, some of the stations were going to be stopped, so we had to change the plan. So I decided to get the river bus, which I love as well, and go to Greenwich and Greenwich Market. It's nice. I like it. It wasn't as good as when I've been before, but it's a lovely day out, and the river bus was great. You can get a ticket and just go on them all day. Went back to the hotel, had some food around there, and then I started to feel fatigue because when I'm out and about, and for those of you that don't know, I had a serious car accident in 2019, and that whole year of 2019, I spent a lot of time indoors. I was in a lot of pain, even though I didn't break anything. Every muscle in my body was tight, stiff, sore, and even though that's when I think it was the October that year, I had the accident in March. I didn't drive for 7 months, and everything was difficult. I could only do about 2,000 steps, and my body would just go into stress. It would just react. And so 2019 was just really about focusing on healing. So now when I go out and about, I can easily do 8,000 or 9,000 steps. I've still got some injuries, and they will fire off. And as long as I do some stretching, which is why I do yoga most days, stretch, I can manage that. But we've done a lot of walking. I think we've done about 10, 11, 12,000 steps each day. So I could start to feel the fatigue in my body. And like I said earlier, I have to be mindful if you've had chronic fatigue in the past. Sometimes trauma and chronic fatigue disrupts what's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, the mind-body connection, and your body can go into overdrive. So I'm still mindful of what I do, and it's that balance between not holding yourself back from doing things, but neither pushing yourself too hard. Anyway, it was great. Absolutely loved getting out and about there, but I could feel the fatigue starting to set in. And we had a hotel booked the next day. So I was meant to come back from London on the Saturday, pack up the van, and leave on the Sunday, which was a bit of a challenge. So we did that, got in the van, and my friend wanted to go to a place called Sandridge on the way to Cambridge, where she had some family connections. We were both doing some ancestry work, and then make our way to Cambridge, which we did. And this is when I first noticed the van was struggling a little bit. We had a hotel booked in Cambridge, and the weather completely turned. And so, of course, when it's absolutely pouring down, it makes a difference as to what your plans are going to be. We wanted to do a whole tour of Cambridge. I've been before. I wanted to go into the centre of town, and Cambridge was incredibly difficult to drive around. The one-way, I got lost in their one-way system. I nearly ended up on what was an old railway line, turned into a bus lane. Some guy on a bike went and showed us how I followed his bike, and he showed us how to get out of this estate that just seemed to be like a maze. So that was a challenge in Cambridge. So we went to Botanical Gardens, but because they'd had some bad storms, they closed down all the greenhouses. So that was a bit naff. And stayed in the hotel there, and then decided. The idea originally on my plan was to go from Cambridge and start going up the East Coast, but I'd spoken to a few friends and said, it's not so brilliant, that part of the coast. So I thought maybe I'll cut that out because we're already now a little bit behind on time. So we booked actually a caravan, decided to do a couple of nights and have a bit of downtime and rest by the beach. Because I love the city, but I love the sea. And I can only do a couple of days in the city before I need to really ground myself again. So we got a caravan right near the beach, and it was incredibly windy, but there was a cafe there. It was gorgeous, and I got to explore Hunstanton, which is we kind of on the tip of Kings Lynn and Norfolk, and there's so much history there. I really want to go back there and visit again. So we did a few days there. We ended up being on didn't realise it was actually because it was a private hire, but it was like a caravan parkway, like a holiday centre. So quiet time of the year, but they had a bar and a swimming pool, and they had activities going on, which I don't normally go for. And I said to my friend, look, there's nothing else to do. We've just been chilling most of the day. Should we go? And they were doing bingo. I haven't done bingo for about 20 years, and I get distracted really easy. So keeping up with one book of bingo. So it was fun. And then there was a karaoke, but poor the guy who was doing the entertainment, there wasn't enough people, so he ended up being the star of the show, which I think he partly enjoyed and was partly exhausting. So then I struggled to get the van started, had to get it started. So I got it started and went to a garage and tried to get a new battery, and I bought a jump start kit because that is imperative. Power and jump start kits in a camper van seems to be the things that you really do need. So then we said, okay, let's go straight from where we were and do direct drive and see if as far as we can get, because I don't like driving when it goes dark. So I want to be booked in somewhere, but we didn't have anything booked. It totally changed our plans as to what campsites we were going to go to, because the weather was much colder at night than it was in the previous years, and it was really pouring down in some places. So we had to start booking hotels instead of going to some of the campsites. So we ended up in Pontefract, famous for Pontefract cakes, which I hadn't had in years, and decided to go and have a look around Pontefract. They've got a castle there, and had a look around the village. And then there was Harrogate, I think it was Harrogate nearby. And then decided, that was it. My friend then was going on to Newcastle, and then not Newcastle, to Edinburgh. We'd lost a few days, so she wanted to have more time in Edinburgh. So she went to Edinburgh, and I decided after getting that far, I could feel the fatigue again to go to a campsite. But it rained really hard, and I mistakenly booked a campsite that was near all the rivers, and the rivers had started to flood, and a lot of people had left for the weekend, and I was a bit stranded over there, and it was really difficult to get around anywhere. If you looked on Google Maps, there was a couple of pubs, so I could go and get a dinner or something right nearby, but they were on the other side of the river, which meant doing an 8-mile drive just to get round the corner. So I stayed there for a couple of days, and my friend came and see me, who lives in Yorkshire, and so we went for, I think we went for Sunday lunch, which was really nice, and that was spontaneous, and I wasn't expecting that. I forgot that she lived really nearby there, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to spend some time in York, and I went to York. I wanted to go to the cathedral because I've wanted to go to cathedrals everywhere I've gone, and it was stunning. York Minster is absolutely stunning. You definitely need a whole day. It is worth doing their tours. Depends on which person you get, because everyone that does a tour is so passionate about different aspects of it. But even if you just did a tour of the stained glass windows, that would probably fill up 2 hours. And they've got loads of nuts and crannies in the cathedral, and it's got the history of sort of the roses, the red and white roses, and the history around the north in Yorkshire in the Dales, and that's all symbolised through the architecture of the building, and also the different people at different points in history that I didn't know anything about, like St Hild and her link with Whitby Abbey, and then Canterbury Cathedral. So that was absolutely stunning, and York itself, very similar to Windsor, but I think it was a lot bigger, with the cobble streets and the shambles and some really old pubs. And I went in one pub, and it was really bizarre because I was transported back to a memory that I had of being in a pub. I went in a pub with my mum and her partner at the time. Maybe I was 12, 13. I think we were visiting somewhere. And it was an old-fashioned pub, the way a lot of them were when I was growing up, which was where the men went in one side, and I think they called that spit and sawdust or something, because I don't know if they actually had sawdust on the floor, or maybe that was from the old cowboy films. And on the other side was the lounge, which was pretty and velvet-covered seats where the ladies went. And the men and women didn't mix. I don't know when it changed, maybe mid-80s. And I went in this pub, and I walked through the door, and I was focused on trying to find a plug because my phone was about to die as well. Get a drink and plug in the phone, and there was just this row of men on this circular seat who all looked up and stared at me, and it took me back to that feeling of when I went in the pub, and we went in the side where all the guys were, and I remember my mum feeling uncomfortable and us going in the lounge, and I don't think we had to, but it just felt easier, for her. And I was just a bit perplexed. So anyway, I didn't stay in there. I would have just sat in there, but they didn't have any plugs in the part that I wanted to sit in. So I went upstairs to the lounge and sat in there, and it was really bizarre. It was like having not quite deja vu, but a dream that I'd been there. So that really struck me, and I started writing about, these differences that I noticed in my other writings about being a woman in the 80s, and what that was like growing up in the north and going into the trade of working as a chef, and that's a whole different story, which if you want to read about, I'll be releasing that as part of the Changing Spaces over this autumn and winter period. And I've gone into some of that, I think, in my Wales trip, where I'm talking over, where it shows pictures and maps and talking about some of the politics and the history of that. So I'm going to check. My mic's still working. Hopefully it is. So I'm going to go into part 2 now.